The laundry room was warm, the scent of fabric softener clinging to the air, mixing with the steady hum of the dryer. The soft rhythm of clothes tumbling inside filled the small space, a constant, almost soothing sound. I moved through the familiar motions, folding, smoothing, stacking, my hands working automatically, my thoughts elsewhere. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Just me, a pile of freshly washed clothes, and the comfort of routine. But then a sound. A soft creak. The subtle shift of the door. I turned my head, expecting my husband. But it wasn't him. My neighbor's son stood in the doorway, watching me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway light behind him cast a faint glow over his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his face. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked like he had expected it. Like he had been waiting. "Did you need something?" I asked, my voice steady, though my fingers curled slightly against the fabric of the towel I was folding. His lips quirked into a faint smirk. "Just passing by. Didn't know you'd still be here." I swallowed, pressing my palms against the pile of clothes, grounding myself. "Just finishing up." He nodded, but he didn't move. Didn't turn away. The quiet stretched between us, thick, weighted, like something waiting to be acknowledged. "Laundry at this hour?" His voice was smooth, casual, but edged with something else. Something unreadable. That's dedication. I forced a small smile, trying to get everything done. He stepped inside. Slow, unhurried. "Need help?" The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. My fingers tightened slightly around the fabric in my hands, my pulse picking up. The room suddenly felt smaller, the warmth of the dryer pressing in, mixing with something else. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to name. "I think I've got it," I murmured, reaching for another shirt, my movements deliberate, focused. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing over his chest, watching me. "You sure? You look like you could use a hand." The way he said it, the way his gaze lingered just a second too long, it made something shift in the air. The weight of his presence pressed against me in ways I hadn't been prepared for. I swallowed, exhaling slowly. I've been folding clothes my whole life. "I think I can manage." His smirk deepened, but he didn't argue. Didn't leave either. The warmth of the dryer mixed with something else now, something charged. My fingers worked over the fabric in front of me, steady but hyper-aware of the space between us, of the fact that he wasn't moving, of the way my own breath felt just a little too quick. Seconds stretched, the moment lingering, unbroken. Then finally, "All right," he said, pushing off the door frame. "I'll let you finish." But as he stepped back, his gaze flickered over me one last time. A glance that lingered just long enough to leave an impression. Just long enough to make my stomach tighten. Then he was gone. The quiet in the laundry room felt different now. The air heavier. The warmth of the dryer no longer comforting, but something else entirely. And I wasn't sure why I found myself staring at the door, waiting for something that wasn't coming back. I stood there for a long moment, my fingers resting on the soft fabric of a folded towel, my breath slower now, heavier. The warmth of the dryer hummed in the background, but it wasn't the only thing I could feel. I was still thinking about the way he had looked at me before he left. The weight of his gaze, the hesitation just before he stepped back. As if he had wanted to say something more. Do something more. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head, willing myself to brush it off. It was nothing, just a strange moment. A pause in an otherwise normal night. And yet, the air in the laundry room still felt thick, charged. Like his presence had left something behind. I grabbed another shirt from the pile, smoothing my fingers over the fabric, trying to refocus. But just as I reached for the next one, I heard it again. The soft creak of the floorboards. My breath hitched. My body tensed, just slightly, just enough for my fingers to tighten around the fabric. And then, forget something? My voice was quieter than I intended, steady but uncertain. He was standing in the doorway again. I turned my head, finding him just where I had left him minutes ago, but this time, something was different. He wasn't leaning against the frame now. He was closer. A step inside, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on me in a way that made my pulse pick up again. He didn't answer right away, didn't explain why he was back. Instead, he just let the silence stretch, his gaze flickering over me, taking in the way I stood, the way my breath had slowed, the way I was still gripping that same shirt in my hands. "Yeah," he finally said, his voice lower this time. "I think I did." The room felt smaller again, the warmth of the dryer pressing in, but it wasn't the only heat in the space anymore. It was coming from him too. From the way he was looking at me. From the way he didn't move, didn't shift away, didn't break the moment. "What is it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Another pause. Another glance that lingered just a second too long. "You tell me." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I swallowed, my fingers still curled against the fabric in my hands, my body still frozen in place. "I should finish up." "Yeah?" His smirk deepened, but it wasn't playful now. It was something else. Something heavier. "Or you could take a break." My breath hitched. He stepped closer, slow, measured, like he was giving me time to react. Like he was waiting for me to say something to stop him. I didn't. The warmth of him was close now, closer than before, close enough that I could feel the air shift between us. The hum of the dryer filled the space, but it wasn't loud enough to drown out the sound of my heartbeat, the slow, steady rhythm of it picking up pace. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Still think you don't need help?" My fingers flexed around the fabric. My breath was shallow. "I don't know." His gaze flickered down, watching my hands, the way they trembled just slightly, barely noticeable, but not enough to go unseen. "I think you do," he murmured. The moment stretched, the air pressing in from all sides. There was something in the space between us now, something unspoken but undeniable, something neither of us had acknowledged but both of us felt. And then, the sound of a door closing somewhere else in the house broke the moment. I exhaled sharply, blinking, the weight of the moment cracking just enough for reality to slip back in. His smirk returned, but there was something else behind it now. Something knowing. "Guess you should finish up then." He stepped back, slower this time, like he wanted me to feel the distance stretching again, like he wanted me to remember what it had felt like before he put it there. I nodded, forcing my breath to steady. "Yeah." He held my gaze for a beat longer, then finally, he turned. I watched as he disappeared down the hall, his footsteps fading, the quiet returning. But the air in the laundry room still felt different. And as I stood there, fingers still curled around the fabric, my breath still uneven, I knew that this moment wasn't over. Not really.